Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode number 24 in the Craft Fair booth review series, where I take a look at a real craft fair booth submitted by one of my subscribers, and I'm going to break this review down into 10 different segments. Along the way, I'll point out things that the vendor is doing well and should continue to do, and then also identify some areas where there's room for improvement. During the review, keep your craft fair booth in mind so that you can apply these tips in order to take your setup to the next level. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, and so for today's booth review, we're going to be taking a look at Candace's booth, and her business name is Vanilla Bean Kitchen. And what we're going to be looking at today is vanilla bean paste and extracts. All right, so basically raw ingredients for taking your kitchen to the next level, essentially. And Candace is based out of Colorado, and apparently tonight there is a watch party happening at Candace's house. So hello everybody, and hope you dig the review. So just a little bit of a summary of what we're kind of looking for in the review today. We're going to hit our normal 10 segments, of course, but one of the things that she put in her email was essentially a description of her business. Okay, so kind of like the goals that she has of her business and a summary of what she does. All right, so I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about today during the review is educating the shopper in a rapid fire environment. Okay, so how do we catch like the shopper's attention rather quickly on a booth with items that maybe they don't have like a learning curve to them, but it's not going to be as like quick and snappy and obvious as like a candle booth, a woodworking booth, okay, where you just glance at it and you know what you get, you can see what you get, so we're going to talk about possible solutions for that on how to draw attention right from the start, when you only have a second or two to work with. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. So let's go ahead and just get started with the review. Okay, here is a look at the booth. This is going to be an outdoor 10 by 10 setup. I have 5 pictures, 5 different angles that we're going to be able to take a look at. So that is great. All the pictures are great quality, so really appreciate that. The first thing we're going to talk about is displays. And there are a few different displays happening at the booth. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit further so we can kind of get some more detail going on here. But first thing you see right off the bat is these wooden displays. And these wooden displays are a little bit compartmentalized. And I really like that because it allows you to, for instance, right here, you have basically just decor, right? So you have just kind of like a little bit of an element that provides like a breath of fresh air, I guess. Not that, your products in themselves are overly abundant or overwhelming, but it's nice to kind of break up patterns in booths, and I really like this. So you'll see this kind of spread out throughout the booth in a few different areas, and I think this is very well done, very tasteful. So again, we have like these square wooden displays, and they're doing a really good job of providing, first of all, they're functional, right? But they also are very attractive. They match one another, so you kind of have a theme already starting to happen within your displays. And they're providing some really good verticality at the booth too. So really they're hitting a lot of the check boxes that we start to talk about as far as displays goes. So we have 3 of them here. So we have this one on the left, and then we have the one kind of in the center. These are both facing outwards towards the shopper. And then you have one positioned diagonally. And I really like this. Actually, I should kind of mention that with this display here too. I think this is really good positioning when you have it pointed on a diagonal outwards, because you're covering people from more than one direction, okay? So where this picture was taken from, this was facing dead on center looking at the booth, and there's still really good visibility here. But if you were approaching the booth, like say from this direction over here on the left, and you were kind of walking towards the middle, you would start to get this facing you pretty early on. Okay, so the way that you have your display set up is very good because it's covering a lot of range, like visibility range for shoppers. Okay, now let's zoom back in a little bit and take a closer look at this display here on the right. So this is really the only display except for this one that we'll circle back to in a moment. But as far as your large displays, this one kind of stands out a little bit. And you have some jars on here. And then these are kind of like in boxes, so it might be like a jar in a box. I'll flip to a different angle in a second. We might be able to get a closer look at this. And then you have like sets up here, so like smaller sets on the top. So let's take a moment to look at our first different angle, and we're going to get a closer look, I believe, at this display right here. So let me see. Here we go. Yeah, so this provides a nice look at it. Solid construction, you know, it looks sturdy, especially for what you have on it. I mean, you're definitely not overdoing it or anything like that. So good job of utilizing your display like within its capabilities. Sometimes they'll have a nice display, but they'll like really push it and cram it, and it kind of goes beyond the scope of what the display kind of should be holding on it. But this is great. It feels appropriate. All in all, I would say your large displays are really nice. Just very tastefully done. This one is in black. Okay, so we have a black display compared to kind of like your natural, your natural wood displays on the other tables. But I don't think the black is any kind of an issue at all, because you have like a lot of black, painted on the other ones. So no issues there. And then obviously with your black tablecloths, you have a lot of that tying in too. So yeah, really nothing to comment on with the large displays. Like I said, very sturdy. When you're at an outdoor event, one of the things you definitely have to consider, like with taller displays, is okay, now let's think about how this is going to react with a gust of wind. And because of the bases of these are either kind of like spread apart, so this is really going to be stable. First of all, because the wind is going to be able to blow through it, so it's not like a solid display like this is. And then on this instance right here, I noticed that you have a lot of things that are probably going to be helping to weigh it down and keep that center of gravity nice and low. That's one of the things that you want to take into consideration with taller displays is, like, where's the center of gravity? Do you have a lot of weight kind of up at the top? And if so, you probably want to start to consider clamping down your displays. So some people will use actual clamps. You can do this in a number of different ways, but some people will kind of like screw in a little bit of a bracket on the back of a display, and then that way you can kind of clamp it down from behind the table, and it's not looking like ugly in the front, for lack of a better term. So yeah, these are all just kind of hypotheticals, but for your specific instance, Candace, I think everything that you're doing is fantastic here. So one more display to look at, and that was in the center of the outward facing table. And that's this little turning display here, probably like a Lazy Susan type of setup where, it spins and people can check out all four sides. So I like these displays a lot. They don't take up a lot of room on the tables, and it, again, kind of breaks up the pattern of displays. So this is really something nice to have here. It's much lower than your large wooden displays. So you as the vendor have a nice spot to kind of stand here and be visible for the customers. So that's always something that you want to take into consideration with your displays, is that you want to have like an area carved out that makes you visibly present at the booth at all times. Okay, so that pretty much sums up the displays. I think we should go ahead and move on. There's not a lot of suggestions that I have for the displays. I think you're doing really great. Again, I like the gaps that you've created with your props. Okay, so like your decorative props. And, we have one here. We have the lemons over here. There's a little, I think it's like a pumpkin or something up here. So you've done a nice job of basically injecting some breathing room into your setup. All right, let's talk about pricing. So we're going to zoom back in, and let's start with this outward facing table right here. So I'm going to zoom in just a touch so you can kind of see it all at one time, hopefully. A little bit too much. Okay, so we have grouped pricing happening at the booth. And I believe that you're actually doubling up and doing some individualized pricing because you have labels on pretty much all your items, which is cool. I like that a lot. Your label, there's a number here. No, this is the ounces. Okay, so this is the weight of the item. So it looks like you're pretty much sticking with the grouped pricing. So guys, if you're kind of unfamiliar with like the two main pricing methods out there, there's individualized pricing where you just simply put a price tag or a price sticker on every single item. Or you can do grouped pricing where, say for example, you have a bunch of similar items arranged together physically at your booth, and then you have one sign that covers that whole area of items. Okay, so some people will double up and they'll do both, but it's kind of rare. Usually people just go one way or the other. Me personally, I don't think that there's really one better way over the other, whether you do individualized or grouped pricing. Some people really swear by the individualized because, well, for example, they'll have like a barcode on their price tag, and for every item that they check out, they actually scan the tag, and then that will help them with their inventory, their replenishment after an event, things like that. But group pricing, really simple, very stress-free, especially during an event. Okay, you don't have to worry about putting tags on replacement items during a show. There's nothing like that to worry about. So like I said, either way that you go, just make sure that you're executing that particular method to the best of your ability. Okay, so now that we've done a little bit of recap on the two different kinds of pricing, let's take a look at these signs here. I'll zoom in on one in particular and kind of make our way around. So we have these deluxe sugars up here on the top left. So there's a 4-ounce shaker jar, and that's $7 each, or 3 for $15. So again, if you're unfamiliar, this is called bundle pricing. Bundle pricing is basically a financial incentive for shoppers to purchase more than one item. Okay, so you give them a little bit of a discount. There's two different ways to bundle price. You can do a discount like this, or some people will do like the freebie method, where if you purchase a high value, higher priced item at a booth, vendors will throw in a freebie, which is a much, much lower value. Okay, so basically it's like incentivizing these big purchases of like these big, high ticket items. Again, whichever way you do it, just make sure that you're making customers aware that, hey, there's some savings to be had. And if you're going to pick up one, well, then what the hell? You might as well pick up 3, right? So, great job having this listed on the signage, so that's fantastic. And you're doing it down here with the resealable pouches. And then over here, when we look at the sugar cubes, we see $6 each, or 3 for $15. So one thing I would say about the signage, I really like that you've injected the branding into it. So especially the logo, which we're going to talk about that in a minute. The logo is top notch. But for this section right here, I would pick either a slightly more legible font. Okay, I mean, it's not like horrible by any means, but there's probably going to be, some old timers, or maybe people just that struggle with their vision a little bit, that come through the booth, and the fonts are a little bit kind of fancy or whatever, but then they're also somewhat small for the size of the sign. Okay, so there's like this big black bar down here on the bottom on all your signage, and I don't know exactly like if it's just a design thing or if it serves like a different purpose or what, but I would actually just consider ditching this section down here and utilizing that, bonus space basically to blow these fonts up just a little bit, make these fonts a little bit bigger. And that's going to help you with a few different things. That's just going to help to make everything a little bit more legible from a close distance, even when you're kind of standing close like this. But also in accessibility, one thing I talk about when it comes to booth accessibility is you're trying to draw people into your booth from as great of a distance as possible. And this is one of the elements of that. Okay, so one of the things that you want to take take into consideration is, is my signage legible from a pretty decent distance? And we're really zoomed in on this picture right now, but if we start to kind of zoom out from, maybe about 5-10 feet away, already it's starting to get a little bit tricky. So again, this is kind of where I'm talking about, like, you have like this bold font, and then you have this handwritten cursive type of font. The two of them are kind of night and day. You can definitely still read this lower font pretty easily, but then the top one is starting to get a little bit tough to read. So just one thing to, again, take into consideration with the pricing signage. Otherwise, I really like the pricing signage. I think that it's a great design. I like the logo up at the top, and then I like that you followed the logo with the item description. So that's, kind of the thing at the top. And your signage is consistent too. So there is definitely something to be said about that, because, we've already seen a lot of booth reviews now where they'll have like one pricing sign for one item, and then over here there's like a different pricing sign and it looks entirely different, and then it kind of repeats. I like the fact that you've built that consistency into the signage, okay? Because if people look at one sign and they see the structure of it where it's like, okay, logo, item name, and then basically sub item name, and then the price, they can pretty much follow that formula from sign to sign, and it's going to be much less effort, as opposed to basically trying to ingest a new type of signage each time. Now on the bottom right here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, because I noticed that in that black space that we were talking about, you do actually have something on this bottom right one. So right here it says, do you need a peppercorn grinder for these fragrant beauties? We have you covered. $10 when purchased with peppercorns. So this is kind of cool. This is actually sort of similar to the bundle pricing method that I was talking about earlier, where if you buy one type of item, you're getting a deal on something else. So again, that's kind of incentivizing multiple purchases and transactions. So I like that you have this black bar here. Okay, so when you're going to provide additional information, I would use that. But when you're not, I would go ahead and just free up the space and then blow up the main fonts a little bit bigger, okay? But I'm glad that we saw this example here so we could kind of see, why that's there, for those extra little tidbits you like to include every now and then. Okay, so let's take a look at a different angle here. So we're going to look at this side of the booth. And all right, we have a couple of different pricing signs over here. So same structure again. And this one says professional size bottles individually priced. All right. And over here, let's zoom in just a touch. Okay, whole bean vanilla paste. And you've got the two different size jars. And then it says here, can't decide which one you love. Try the vanilla explore set. You can try 3 varieties and decide later, $25. So you're doing a really, really good job of giving the people options. Probably one of the better booths that we've seen in the booth review series of that method, okay? And it's always great to give people options, and it starts to give people some ideas of if they could be purchasing for themselves and giving them some options. Or an example like this, it like basically screams a gift set as a gift for a friend or a relative. So just dropping these hints at the booth, and it's subtle. You don't have to like scream things out for people to kind of get people's wheels turning. So this is a really good job of doing this. So overall, your signage is absolutely fantastic. Just those couple slight tweaks with either the script or the size of the script, and I think you're going to be in great shape. All right, so now that we've covered the pricing, let's talk about your general signage. So we're going to leave the marketing stuff aside for our marketing segment coming up next. And the one that's kind of jumps out at me that I really like is this right here. Just as simple as this, handmade. And this is something that, again, I recommend this a lot, but if you make something that's handmade, put it out there, put it out there that it's handmade, especially something like this. Somebody might come along and see something like this, and especially as well as this is being displayed, they're going to be like, oh, this is just, a big company or whatever. Um, this is great to have out there to say, hey, no, this is my baby, my project, and I craft this by hand. So again, just as simple as this is, it's great to have this out here, kind of front in a nice prominent position too. Okay, we'll zoom in just a little bit. We might have to flip to a different view because we're getting a little bit grainy here. Yeah, let me go to this one right here. Okay, so we talked about the pricing signage, and now right here you have your payment method sign. And this is a really, really nice one. You've got the Venmo QR code, you've got the Venmo sticker saying Venmo accepted here, and then you have the square sticker that lets people know what types of cards you take. So really nice. This is obviously where the transactions are going to take place, so it's always a good idea to have your payment option sign where the transactions are going to take place. So good job here with the placement as well. Okay, now if we flip over to this side of the booth, we have a couple of these smaller signs on top of two different displays. So the one on the left, I can't quite make it out, okay, because if I zoom in, it just gets, grainy on me. But I think it's highlighting these items right down here, okay, the extracts. And you go into a little bit of detail. I can see like the word ingredients, okay, so you have the ingredients listed out here, which is great. People have, and this is becoming a conversation that's more out in the open these days with food allergies and things like that. And just based on, first of all, your presentation, and secondly, the email that you wrote to me and your communication with me and on your website, that is very important to you, taking the food allergens very seriously and making sure that you're using ingredients that protect people from those types of situations. So that is great to see on that side. Over here, there's a sign that goes into detail on the Vanilla Explorer sets. That's the one that we were talking about down here, where it has the packs of 3 for the $25. And you go into a little bit of detail on the sets right here. So I wanted to highlight these because these signs are, first of all, they're subtle, right? They're not kind of like jumping out and stealing any kind of spotlight away from anything, but they're doing such a good job of supporting where they are needed. Sometimes vendors, we have items that we want to display, but it requires a little bit of education. There's a little bit of educating the consumer involved, and there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. So some people will, a lot of people are doing these days are putting tablets out on their booth. And I think that's a decent option, so some people will have kind of like video that loops on repeat, and maybe it's like 20 seconds or 30 seconds long, and it just keeps repeating over and over. And a lot of times this will be based around the process of whatever's being made. So again, kind of just following up on what we talked about with having the handmade sign at the booth. The tablet is something that I would at least consider because it just reinforces the fact that you are creating this. You are creating these from scratch by hand, all that stuff. And it just solidifies that handmade quality of everything at the booth. Okay, so something to consider. Now, if you do go down this road, keep the loop of the video very, very short, okay? Because keep it to like maybe 25 seconds tops if you can. And the reason why is because as people are walking by, shoppers are walking by, you're only going to have literally a few seconds to make that impression. And if you have like a 2 or 3 minute long video, that's great to have those kind of details and everything. But odds are when somebody's walking by, it's just too lengthy of a video experience to like draw somebody in, so I think you're better off keeping it really short and sweet. Just stick to like the absolute crucial most paramount information and loop that. So that's how you would go about that if you decide to bring a tablet out when it comes to shopper education on your items. But these signs, there's absolutely nothing wrong with these signs. I think they're doing a great job. They're tasteful, they're not overpowering anything, and it looks like they have just enough information to kind of get the gist of it without requiring somebody to stand there for like 5 full minutes and read something. So I think the amount of information that you have on each one of these is really good too. Okay, so let's dive into marketing. So marketing at the booth is pretty good, definitely above average. So the first thing that we see is the big banner on the left-hand side. Now, one thing I'll say about this is, okay, I can see right here on the right side that there's literally, as the picture was taken, a side wall was going up. Okay, so I do wonder if there was also a side wall over here, and then the banner was just kind of, in front of that. The reason why I ask is because there's an open space on this side of your booth. And if this is like an area where shoppers could come through, then of course you don't want to block it off. Now, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt and say that I highly doubt that this was the type of situation where where shoppers would come through this area from the left-hand side, because it looks like the tents are pretty much like back to back if you look at the row behind you. Okay, so with that being said, if you expected a neighbor next to you, or if you expected shoppers to not be able to access the booth from the left-hand side, absolutely no issue at all with this being over here. Now, for example, if you had a corner spot, then pretty much goes without saying that you wouldn't want to block one of the entrances off with a banner, okay? But I think that's, again, kind of goes without saying, kind of stating the obvious. So the banner itself, let's take a look at it. First of all, boom, right at the top, it literally takes up 50% of the banner. So if we look at this, it's half of the banner size is just the logo and the business name, okay? No issue with that at all. I think it looks very, very good, very tasteful, great design, great font. And down here on the bottom, it says whole bean, vanilla, extracts, and more. And then on the bottom right, we have a QR code, and it looks like it goes directly to an Instagram. All right, Instagram logo right there. And then very bottom right, let me see if this is the website. I can see it says Vanilla Bean Kitchen. I think it's probably just at Vanilla Bean Kitchen to tell people that, okay, this is my handle on pretty much all my social medias. So pretty cool. I think it's pretty solid. Now, it doesn't really play into your green theme that you have all over the booth. Don't really think that's much of an issue. Okay, so I wouldn't sweat that. Like if you're considering like, oh, I don't know if I want to drop like another $100 on a banner just to make it green, I really wouldn't sweat that too much, because the green is popping at the booth plenty. And if you start to have too much super, super bright green that isn't your packaging, okay, because a lot of your packaging is kind of like this beige tan color, right? Then you start to flirt with crossing that line of, am I taking away attention from the items themselves? Is there too much attention on just the signage now? So I actually kind of like that this is black and white. That was like the longest way for me to say I like this black and white. But yeah, like I said, because, your runners are doing a good job of, drawing some attention, kind of spicing it up. But then you have this kind of being safe. And this is such a big sign too, that if it was a big old bright green sign, then I think I would be a little bit worried about, okay, now the eyes are on the signage a little bit too much. So let's go ahead and just move right to the runners. So the runners have a little bit of an alternate logo as opposed to this. So the font itself is slightly different. Okay, we can see like the V here has more of like, kind of curvy lines. And then this V here comes down to the point. So it's a slightly different font, but you have to be kind of a nerd like me to really dive into this like this deep, it's very, very close. So again, I wouldn't be worried about that too much. Okay, I wouldn't be stressed out about that too much. Then you have a circular logo, and then underneath, I really like this a lot. Underneath, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It says create memories in your kitchen. And I think this is huge because, again, it circles back to the fact that your items might need a little bit of educating the consumer, right? Educating the shopper about what exactly is going on here. Like from a distance, if you look at some of these things, you might think, oh, these are actually like ready-made items or whatever. Like especially the bags, the resealable bags. A lot of times you'll see this with vendors that are selling, peanuts or cashews or whatever, like already made stuff that's ready to go and ready to consume. So the fact that you have this built into your logo is good. I think it reinforces the fact that, okay, these are going to set you up to create great things in your kitchen. All right. So really, really nicely well done here. And then to top it off, you have the website on there, which is fantastic. So I always tell people, on your big banner or on your runner, if you have a .com website and you've put that much time, energy, effort, and money into creating a .com website, put it out there, definitely put it out there. So great job having that. And then while we're talking about the runners, I do like the fact that there's a little bit of a texture there. So a lot of times, we're leaning towards keeping things like a solid color, a solid texture. This is just enough going on here where it's not rambunctious, okay, and it's not loud. So I like this a lot. Very, very tasteful runners. All right, now we're gonna zoom way in to this table right here for a couple nice marketing aspects. And the first thing that we're going to talk about are these cards. Okay, so these are essentially taking the place of a business card, and it's like a little bit of a marketing card where it has a little bit more information on it than you would see on a typical business card. So it says Colorado, I think it says Colorado made. No, Colorado proud. Okay. So again, reinforcing the fact that this is handmade locally. You got a QR code on there. Again, appears to be going to the Instagram. And then you have a few different things about your business. And you have your website and you have a little bit more information. Again, kind of educating the consumer about your business. So these are taking the place of the business cards. They're located in a minimum of 3 different spots at the booth, which I love because, again, if you only have your business cards or your handouts in one location and there's like 2 or 3 customers there, well, then that just means that they're inaccessible to anybody else that could want them at your booth. Okay, so great job having these at different spots at the booth. In the middle here, we see another form of marketing, and this is a monthly email newsletter. Absolutely fantastic to see this at the booth, especially right out in the open. Some people will do this, but they'll kind of have it like hidden away. And this is one of those things where if you're going to start to build up contacts for an email newsletter at a show and at your booth, definitely go ahead and put it out there. You don't want to hide this, and it's worth having it out. It's worth dedicating that little bit of, featured space for. So again, really good decision as far as the marketing here. Really, really like it. Okay, now another thing that we can talk about as far as your marketing goes is the labels themselves. So let's take a look at some of these labels here. We got like a nice picture we can zoom in a little bit on. And all the labels have either a written Vanilla Bean Kitchen on it, or you actually have your stamped logo, your circular logo. Okay, so this is just yet another level that you can go to in order to market your business. People are going to buy these things. People are going to take them home. You have gift sets. People might buy them as a gift and give them to a friend or a relative. And again, it has your logo on it. Okay, so if somebody likes it and they start to become familiar with your items, they're going to become familiar with your brand too, just by association. So you've done a really, really good job of putting yourself out there, making sure that people are going to connect with you. So really hats off to you on marketing. You've absolutely crushed it. As far as suggestions, really not a whole lot. You're just absolutely doing great. So keep doing what you're doing. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about vertical space. So vertical space is excellent at the booth. This is basically just 2 table spots, all right? So even though it's big space in a 10 by 10, you've got it pretty much down to just two corners of that 10 by 10. Nothing wrong with that, perfectly fine, especially since your items are smaller. You don't really need to be spreading out a bunch, and it just buys more room for people to come into your space to check out your items. So the vertical space is really important because when you have just table spots, okay, so when you have just tables, that is when you're faced with the decision of like, how high up off the tables do I go? How much do I just set down on the tables? And your displays are helping you out so much with that because you've spaced them out so that you have these ebbs and flows. So here on the far left, you have a nice high spot, and you've even gone up on top of the displays to go really high. And then you've kind of come down, so you've got it. I call this the canyon effect, where basically if you work towards the edge of a table, all right, so like one extreme end of the table, that's where you should kind of be like at your highest, and then work your way down. And even down here past this display now, we go even further down and we start to kind of come back up, right? So this, again, has carved out a really nice area for you to stand and be present at the event. Okay, so if there is one piece of consistent feedback that I've gotten from shoppers throughout the years, it's that they want to see the vendor, okay? They want to see the vendor. They don't want the vendor to be kind of hidden behind displays and things like that. So always make sure that you have some kind of a space carved out for yourself that you can easily be seen, all right? So again, we're kind of talking about the verticality here. So we start high, we work low, we've got some visibility here. That's great. We come back up. There's a little bit of a gap here. It's not as noticeable from this view, but it actually is pretty decent between these two displays. Okay, so like the corner where the tables meet, there's a nice gap here again, and then you've wrapped it up over here with two more displays. Really nice. And even here, there's actually a spot for a vendor to, the vendor to stand. Okay, so Candace could be here for a little bit, or she could be over here. So there's a couple of different spots for her to be seen. So that is great. Love to see that. I really don't have too much tips on the verticality. I think it's pretty good. If I would consider doing one thing, it's to make a little bit more room here. So I'd probably clear this a little bit because you're tall over here, and you have some space over here, but I'd probably consider leaving this open again just to make you as visible as possible. So super easy fix. Just take these decorative pieces right here and then move them on right over here. Okay, so you're just kind of buying yourself a little bit more visibility for those shoppers because they really like that. Okay, now let's talk about colors, contrast, and texture. Absolutely a huge strength of the booth. I love the combination between the black and the green. I think it is just really, really popping just visually. It's sitting in that sweet spot where it's definitely drawing attention to your booth, but I would say that is pulling people in and doing a good job of setting your items up for success. Okay, I don't think it's overpowering anything. I think it's just a nice magnet. So really, really good job. Again, I like that this big banner here is played a little bit more safe. I would not update this, or if you do, update it so that it has like the circular logo with the updated font, cool, that's fine, but I would stick with black and white for this, okay? Yeah, your tablecloths look fantastic. They're coming down. We're not seeing any kind of texture issues over here. Like I mentioned before, with your table runners, there's not some really loud pattern. Like sometimes you'll see people use those checkered patterns or even like kind of like a flannel or plaid look. That is not an issue over here. So we have mostly solid colors, but just textured enough to give it some personality. And yeah, as far as contrast goes, let's take a look at your displays as a really good example as at the booth. Now, we talked about before, you have these glass jars and there's like a tan beige label, and your resealable bags are either the tan beige or they're this very bright green. And against the black, really, really good decision to paint the inside wall of these black because your items stand out so well up against that. So yeah, just up and down all areas of the booth, great decisions being made. I really, really am a big fan of it. Okay, now let's dive into strength of theme. So the theme is very well established, well defined, and you're staying in that lane. Okay, so I've kind of talked about this method, quite a bit in the booth reviews, and when vendors have a specific realm of either arts and crafts or whatever they're creating at their booth, it's nice to see the vendors kind of just stay in that. When vendors get a little bit too experimental and they start throwing pretty much everything at the wall just to kind of see what sticks, I think that's where vendors run into some issues on what is the booth identity, and have you lost your booth identity at this point? So that's not an issue here. None of that is an issue, and I like that you've again stayed within the culinary theme and you've explored it quite a bit. So there's different elements going on here, but you stayed in there. So great job with the theme. As far as your items, actually what you're making. And then visually, we've talked about the theme in several different aspects. Your signage is basically a theme in and of itself because your signage is so uniform with one another. So that helps your theme as well. The fact that it has the green and black, that gets tied into your branding and your marketing theme. So it really is all tied in together to one another, and it is cohesive, it is unified, and it looks great. All right, now let's talk about accessibility. So this is kind of a long topic. What I talk about with accessibility is, first of all, like the safety of shoppers to be able to physically get in and out of your booth, navigate it, and not have to worry about hurting themselves. And then another aspect of accessibility is how close do people want to get to the booth? Is it tidy? Is it clean? Do you have a bunch of stuff laying around like clutter? Another aspect of accessibility is also how far can people see things from? So like physically accessing the booth. Okay, we did touch on that a little bit during the signage. Okay, so this all ties into this accessibility theme. So let's start with the easy one. Let's talk about the physical hazards at the booth. And I don't see anything to worry about. There's nothing laying across. Sometimes you'll see booths with electrical hookup where they have a cord running and maybe the cord is insecure, or it could be just routed in a better manner. None of that to be worried about here, so that's great. Your tablecloths, they're blowing out just a touch. Okay, so you can see like the table edge is right here, and then the tablecloth is kind of blown out over here. Sometimes there's stuff that you can do about that, but then sometimes it's just going to happen a little bit. And I think the distance that this is blown out isn't much as a concern, and especially because of the fact that you don't have it actually like dragging down on the ground. It's not actually rolled up on the ground, and that's when you actually run into some issues because people can definitely catch their foot on that. So just be sure that you don't run into that situation, and that you have your tablecloth pulled up high enough to where it's not lumped down and rolled up on the ground. So I would say that looks good here. And then over here, it's even better. Okay, so it's coming right down, maybe about an inch or two above the ground. You can actually see the shadow right there. So it's slightly off the ground and no rolling issues at all. So tablecloths look great. Your tent weights, they're doing a good job. I like the way that you've secured them. These might just be like Velcro straps, and that's just going to make sure that these aren't going to fall over either, like on somebody's leg or crush an infant or something. So yeah, no infants crushed. That's always a good thing at the craft fair. But yeah, this is doing good too because these are really beefy tent weights. Your tent is not going to go anywhere, and they're very tall and narrow, so it's not eating up a lot of the foot room at the booth. So yeah, things look good as far as like a safety standpoint at the booth. Now the tidiness, we talked about that. I didn't see anything at all to worry about. We can zoom in a little bit just to make sure that there's no cups or lunch laying around, and I don't see anything at all. You don't see any totes laying around. Okay, so things must be tucked underneath the tables, and that's always a great sign too. So you've done a good job of making sure that the booth is tidy and neat and orderly And then finally, the subject that we kind of touched on a little bit before is like the visible accessibility. Are you going to be able to draw people in from a distance, or do they have to like be right in your booth in order to see everything and read everything? If there was any room for improvement in accessibility, it would be this aspect of it. Okay, so let's take a look from back here. So this picture was probably taken, again, the booth is a 10 by 10. So this picture was probably taken 5 to 8 feet in front of the beginning of the booth, okay? And from here, you can make out your major stuff. You can make out your table runner really well. The handmade sign looks fantastic from here. But then when we see your pricing signage, that is where, we're going to have to step in and get much, much closer in order to read any of that. So what I would do is consider a sign at your booth that says something like ingredients that level up your dishes or ingredients that level up your kitchen, like something like that. I understand that you have this right here, okay? Whole bean vanilla extracts and more. Okay, great. But again, sometimes people just get laser focus vision on the booths and they actually will bypass big banners, okay? They'll just kind of skim the tables. So you want to basically make sure that you have both bases covered. You're doing a great job of covering the people who are going to notice the runner and then the banner, but then somewhere like mixed in here on the actual tabletop, you want to have a decent sized sign that says, again, something like ingredients that level up your kitchen or your dishes or something like that, okay? Maybe even you take the phrase that you have on your banner or your runner right here, create memories in your kitchen. That could be cool too, because you already kind of have that built in your branding. But just something that's going to, again, really quickly educate the shopper and try to get those people into your booth that are kind of just skimming the tabletops. All right, now let's talk about general use of space. So one of the things that we tend to talk about in this particular segment is the booth layout. And I think the booth layout is good. It provides a lot of room here for shoppers to come in. You could have a couple of people standing in front of this part of the booth on the right side. You could even have a person standing over here. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of room in this middle section for probably like 5 or 6 people to be in checking out your stuff. So you could legitimately have about 7 people checking out your booth at one time. Okay, so I think that's pretty good for a 10 by 10. That's really about like the max that you can push it before it's just going to get cramped no matter what layout you do. So as long as you like this layout, I think it displays really well. We talked very early on in the video about having your displays set out diagonally like this, and then having your forward facing displays obviously facing straight out. So again, you've kind of done a great job with your space in how you're displaying things in order to attract shoppers from a wide angle. Okay, so I think that's really good. And your banner over here is kind of covering the people approaching from the right side. All right, so even though you don't have like a table or any items over on this side, because you have the banner facing out towards the right, again, that's going to just put some eyes on your booth, and they don't necessarily have to be looking straight forward, okay? So that's one of the biggest things that vendors should be doing, is trying to like cover a big range of visibility for their booth. One of the ways that you can do this is take a step out of your booth, like kind of approach the booth as you would if you were a shopper. So walk towards it from one side and see if you can actually see anything at your booth from one side, and then walk past your booth and come from the other direction. And again, see if you can actually, see any kind of signage or displays or product at your booth. You don't want your booth to be strictly a face forward experience, okay? Because we already talked about how little time you have to make an impression on people walking by. So you don't want to basically bottleneck that time to an even shorter amount, okay? You want to give yourself as big of a window of opportunity as possible. So yeah, like I said, work that booth from left to right and just make sure that you're making an impression on shoppers from multiple angles. Okay. This is segment number 10. This is the eye test. And the eye test, we've kind of talked about it already, but the eye test is basically the 1 or 2 seconds that you get to make an impression on a shopper, and what are you doing to get them to stop at your booth and check your stuff out. So first of all, the strength of the theme, I think, is huge with this booth. Absolutely dynamite. I do see a back wall. I'm sorry, I should say a side wall going up over here. I'm sure that you guys did this, especially if you were putting up a side wall, but absolutely make sure that you've got a solid color backdrop as well, okay? Because we want to cut out and cancel out all that noise in the background, okay? All this just visual distraction that you see back here. If you put this solid white wall behind the backdrop, it's going to make it so that your eyes have no choice but to focus on everything here on top of this table. Okay, it's going to be fantastic. So I think you were getting there, but the picture was just taken before the event started, so if you weren't already doing that, definitely do it. But if you were, just keep doing that. Trust me, keep using that back wall, because that's never going to hurt you. But yeah, I mean, as far as the eye test goes, I think the booth is just extremely attractive. This is definitely one of the more attractive, well put together, mature booths that we've seen in the booth review series. Fantastic color combinations, great contrast all throughout the booth. I mean, whether you're talking about your signage, your displays, everything, and the packaging is top notch. I want to mention that too. Vendors, don't get into the temptation of going with very, very cheap packaging, okay? Especially if you have items like this where it's maybe just a package of one or a package of three, like a set of three. You want to make sure that your packaging is great. And like I said, put your branding into your packages so that as people have these items and they use these items in their home, they're just constantly being reminded of who they got it from. So again, don't miss this opportunity to just keep reminding these people that, hey man, my brand is awesome and you should probably come back to me. So yeah, that's really about it. I think just the biggest hurdle with your booth, and it's your booth is great, so I wouldn't say that, there's any kind of like big hurdle or any kind of obstacle to overcome, but I think the thing that you should focus on the most is just educating the consumer, okay? And how can you do that as quickly as possible, efficiently as possible? And maybe you do it in a couple of different ways at your booth. So like I said, I like the small white signs that provide about a paragraph of information where people can read about it, and it takes them 30 seconds, like at most, to read it, and they get a really good scope of what the item is all about. Okay, so those signs are fantastic. I would definitely consider the sign that says ingredients that level up your dishes or your kitchen, or maybe you can use your branding here and it says create memories in your kitchen. Even that would be cool. I would also consider the tablet that has maybe a 20-25 second video on loop that is just super informative and really, really compact and concise, okay? But that is about it. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of big mind-blowing tips during this review, but I think there's something to be said about that. Again, when you have a booth of this quality and this caliber, you're going to have to start digging deeper and deeper into what can you improve, because you've already done a lot. You've already made so many good decisions that, finding the opportunities now is going to be almost like a chore in and of itself. Okay. So Candace, just keep doing what you're doing. The improvements that you have down the road or coming up or whatever, they're not going to be big. They're just, there isn't really going to be anything like groundbreaking anymore at this point, because you already have such a great foundation. So just trust your process. If you encounter a show that's kind of disappointing, try to not let it shake you and your display and your setup. Trust what you're doing and trust your process. So I hope you enjoyed the review. This was a really fun one to do. This was definitely a different set of items, a different business model to try to navigate a booth review on. So I really appreciate you reaching out. And again, what's up to the watch party? Hey! So all the viewers that are watching this, I have Candace's links down below. You can see her website. You can see her social media handles. Give her a follow. All right. Hop on the social media, give her a follow, check out her website. All right. So if there's something that you see that you'd like for, your kitchen and your setup, go ahead and pick something up. It's fantastic. And, also, consider something for a gift giving season. So if somebody's birthday or, maybe a holiday is coming up, great. Take advantage of it and buy local, shop from each other. So love to see that. Okay, so if you want to get your booth reviewed, check out my website. It's howtocraftfair.com. I have all the information on there that you'll need for a booth review. I also have my Amazon links, and that is great for items that you might need as a vendor or even an organizer of a craft fair that, could come in handy. Finally, I have a link to my Etsy shop, and my Etsy shop is great because there are a bunch of cheat sheets and helpful sheets that are going to help you with a craft fair. So be sure to check that out. So this was episode number 24 in the Craft Fair Booth Review series. If you want to check out all the other episodes in this series, click on the playlist above, and thank you all so much for watching.